Software licenses are important, not TOS, that's different. I'm talking about the legal spells that developers can slap on their code, forcing even trillion-dollar corporations to bow before them. That's right, a lone developer, a simple and humble goose goat chicken farmer like myself, can put Google, Apple, and Facebook into a chokehold and make them squeal like pigs. How? Software licenses. In this video, we're diving into what software licenses are, why they matter, and thanks to the wisdom of former big tech employees, how you can do a little bit of trolling. Oh, and before we start, I'm not a lawyer. This isn't legal advice, it's fun advice. Let's start with the absolute basics. Open source software is simple. Developers share their source code with the world so anyone can view, modify, and distribute it. It's all about transparency, collaboration, and community. Despite smelling like a LAN party, open source devs have built some insane things. Browsers, game engines, and even an entire OS. All fueled by nerdy passion. Just a bunch of dudes and gals coding for the love of it. No corporate funding, no expectations, just pure fun. And it's not just big flashy projects. Open source devs also build the invisible stuff. Things like libraries, networking tools, and graphical interfaces. You know, the buttons you click. Case in point, Fumo Bounce. What is it? A website where you throw little anime plushies around with physics. And that's it. That's the whole point. Peak internet. Since it's open source, you can read the code, modify it, share it, or even host your own version. Basically, you can do whatever you want. Or can you? Let's take another look at this repository. See that file called license? If you open it,
oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no.
yes, that's a wall of legal jargon that you have to follow if you wanna mess with the code. Otherwise, the developer can Saul Goodman your ass. Licenses basically tell you what you can and can't do with the code. For example, Fumo Bounce uses the MIT license, one of the more common ones. Here is a quick summary. You can use it for commercial purposes. You can modify it. You can share it. You can do whatever. The developer is not responsible if it breaks. The developer doesn't have to help you or has guarantees it's gonna work. So basically, I could take Fumo Bounce, replace the Fumos with subscribe and like buttons, and then charge you $5 on my Patreon. Link below, by the way. As long as I don't sue the original developer when it inevitably breaks, I'm in the clear. So yeah, join my Patreon. Back to the topic. How does this relate to trolling big tech? Well, let's return to my Fumo Bounce example. To make my version, all I did was swap a few images and that's it. Minimal effort. And like I said, I can now legally sell it. No issues, no lawsuits, all good. Now imagine this. Replace me with a massive corporation like Google or Apple. Replace Fumo Bounce with something more fundamental, like the graphical user interface library. The kind of software that powers the buttons you tap and click on. You may be wondering, why do these billion-dollar companies do this? They have like a gorillion employees. They can just make their own software, right? The quick and simple answer? Money. Developing software takes time, and time is money. And if there's one thing we all know, it's that companies will do anything for money. Especially, after recent events. Now, making software at an industry level isn't as simple as just whipping up some code. There's an entire software development lifecycle which goes something like this. 1. Planning. What are we making? 2. Analysis. More planning but more in-depth. 3. Design. Figuring out how to program it. 4. Implementation. Actually programming it. 5. Testing. Does it work? 6. Maintenance. Getting it from catch on fire in 6 months. And as you can guess, this process takes forever. Which means more time, more money, and hundreds of hours in meetings instead of programming. Man, programming in an industry level is so cringe. So, what do companies do? They just look at open source projects and take them. You made this? I made this. I made this. Just an aside, this dynamic isn't entirely one-sided. Yes, big companies take from open source projects, but let's not forget, the developer did willingly put the source code out there. This isn't really unexpected. And to be fair, it's not always exploitative. Some companies actually pay developers to keep their projects alive. It happens. Oh, and sometimes companies even open source their own projects. Rare, but it happens. Basically, it's not all black and white. It's complicated, messy, a big, confusing gray area. But honestly, I don't want to get too deep into that because I have a proposition. A strategy so cursed, so annoying, so surprisingly effective that it just might work. How do we do it? How do we troll big companies? I call this strategy the porcupine strategy. The plan is simple. When a company forks, commonly known as copying, a project, they have to follow its license. So if you're a developer, just slap a funny, unhinged, and downright diabolical license on your code. Now, whenever someone tries to mess with your project, they're legally obliged to follow whatever nonsense you put in there. Unfortunately, there aren't many of those, so we will have to write our own. Congratulations, you turn your code into a porcupine. Spiky, annoying, and probably not worth touching. And if a company does touch it, now that will be a funny moment. How do I know this will work? Well, let's just say I have sources inside big tech and they told me some very interesting weaknesses. 1. It's tedious to use an uncommon license. Big companies have layers upon layers of management, departments, and teams. Communication is a nightmare. Finding the right person to talk to approve something takes like forever. When a development team wants to use an open source project, they have to vet it. This means checking the code to make sure it's useful and not a virus, confirming that they can modify it for their needs, and finally, actually reviewing the license. If it's a standard license, nobody bats an eye, but you slap on something bizarre, suddenly legal, management, and other departments have to get involved, and they hate that. It's cringe. 2. Licenses can be displayed to the public. Most standard open source licenses require crediting the developers, which means that the license itself often gets publicly displayed. For example, if you're using the YouTube app right now, go to Profile, Settings, About, and Open Source Licenses. That's a massive list of all open source projects YouTube relies on. They have to publish it. So if your license has something embarrassing, they might have to publicly display it somewhere in their app or website. And 3. They simply cannot agree to your license. If your license forces them to, say, apologize for everything morally reprehensible that they've done, they won't do it. That's how corporations work. Simple as that. Now, how do we weaponize this? To make the ultimate troll license, we need 1. A unique license, so legal has to be involved. 2. Clauses companies don't want to share publicly. And 3. Unhinged and unacceptable conditions. Now, we just have to write the damn thing. But where do we start? Good question. They say imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So let's look at some existing funny licenses to get some ideas. The Overwatch license. You must have a higher competitive Overwatch 2 rank than the developer. The strongest public license. You are required to acknowledge Cyrano from Toho as the strongest in Gansokyo. The Satania Daikuma license. You cannot promote any Gabriel dropout characters except for Satania. The Anyone But Stallman license. Richard Stallman, his children, anyone pretending to be him, and anyone with his last name are prohibited from using this software. These are just a few examples of the kind of unhinged nonsense we can incorporate. I've linked 2 GitHub repositories below the like and subscribe button that have even more of these ridiculous licenses. Now that we have some inspiration, let's actually write a license that'll mess with companies. Before we begin, let me remind you for legal reasons that I am not a lawyer. Everything I'm about to say is purely hypothetical and for fun. This is not legal advice. Now, let's go over the 3 qualities our license needs again. 1. It needs to be unique. It forces legal teams to actually look at it. 2. It needs to have clauses that companies don't want to share publicly, makes them hesitate to use it. 3. It includes unhinged and unacceptable terms, ensures that they can't agree to it. You can modify an existing license like the MIT license, which is widely used, or you can let AI generate one for you. And since I'm lazy, I'm gonna go the AI route. I have animals to feed, taxes to pay, and victory royales to achieve. Bro, fucking god, it just so happens that I have been working on a Patreon reward where patrons get uncensored access to AI models like GPT-4o, Claude, and DeepSeek R1. It's still in alpha, but if you wanna follow along, consider joining. First, I spun up an AI instance, selected GPT-4o as my model, and asked it to generate a license based on our 3 very important criteria, and this is what I told it to make. The Hatsune Miku Fortnite license. You must own the Hatsune Miku skin in Fortnite and have won a victory royale with it. The eBeg license. You must include PayPal links asking users for $3,000 while displaying this GIF. The No Profanity license. Users agree to never use profanity in the project. Sounds simple until you realize how long the list of banned words is. The YouTuber license. You agree to like and subscribe to the video. Did you notice the buttons actually light up? It's pretty dope. There were a few more things I wanted to include, but they were a little bit too extreme for YouTube. Now that we have our cursed license, you might be wondering, what's the next step of my master plan? What's the final diabolical move to bring these evil big companies to their knees? Wherever you can legally put the license, put it there. If you're a developer, slap the license onto your projects. If you're not a developer but have developer friends, convince them to do it. If you're neither, you can still apply this concept to creative works. Art, writing, photography. Just tweak the license a little bit to fit. And just like that, the trap is set. Anyone who wants to touch your stuff now has to follow your completely unhinged demands. You can use this power to shake the biggest tech giants or bully the smallest of shrimps. If Google wants to use your code, make them pay $1 gorillion. Evil. And that's why nobody gets to use my programs unless they own the Hatsune Miku skin in Fortnite and they come play with me.